Hello, strong, beautiful, confident woman of God. Yes, I am talking to you. Welcome to the Purpose After Domestic Violence podcast, where getting freedom from the effects of domestic violence meets empowerment to walk in the fullness of your God-designed purpose. I am your host, Tina. I am an attorney, an author and speaker, and a Christian life purpose coach. I will be your guide here, helping you on your journey from overcoming victimhood and just simply surviving to stepping into the victorious life God has waiting just for you. As we travel this road together, Purpose After Domestic Violence is not just a podcast. It's a sacred space where the shackles of domestic violence are broken and empowerment takes root, grows, and flourishes. Here, we are not just surviving, we're thriving in the fullness of our God-designed purpose. I have personally walked the path from victimhood to victory, and I'm here to guide you through it. Picture me as your big sister, holding your hand, sharing wisdom and revelation, and helping you navigate the twists and turns of this path towards healing, freedom, and empowerment. Whether you're on the path to victory or seeking a guiding light in the storm, Purpose After Domestic Violence is here for you. Together, we'll illuminate the path forward to a life filled with purpose. Welcome, my sweet sister, to the Purpose After Domestic Violence podcast. Good morning, my sweet sisters, and welcome back to the podcast. I have a special episode for you today. I am going to compare the Escalation of Violence Scale with a scale that I created called the Victim to Victory Scale, okay? And then in between these two scales, I'm going to talk about a concept called restory, okay? All right, so let's dive in. I also have a special bonus for you today. I am going to put these scales in the show notes. It's a free PDF. What it is 2 pages from my POWER After DV Workbook. Okay, so in my workbook, you'll find the Escalation of Violence Scale on page 57, and you'll find the Victim to Victory Scale on page 176. Okay, now the Escalation of Violence Scale is widely used in the domestic violence world. This is a tool that I used back when I was working at the Domestic Violence Agency, and it was part of the intake packet because it's really, really important to really get a clear picture of the physical violence that's happening in the relationship. And so many of my clients, and even myself, we think, oh, he didn't hit me, so there's no physical violence happening. And that's not necessarily true. And I actually did in my workbook, because I have a copy of my book and workbook, in my workbook for myself, I didn't consider my relationship to be physically violent. But I actually highlighted a whole lot. I actually got up to the bottom of the second step at the top. Okay, and when I say step, it's because the visual of this is a staircase, okay? And then what I did when I worked at the agency is I created my own victim to victory scale. Okay. So this escalation of violence scale, I think was created by Turning Point. They're in Columbus, Indiana. I not entirely sure on that, but that's who I gave credit to. So if somebody else created this first, I want to know because I want to give you credit. Okay. Anyhow, let's dive in. So if you're listening to this episode and you are at a place where you can actually download and look at these scales, I wanted it to be just easy peasy. You click on that PDF link and it'll open it right up for you. You don't have to put in your email address. You don't have to, you know, buy it. It's there for you because this is so critically important that I feel I want you to have it. And I want you to have easy access to it right now while you're listening to this podcast. Okay. So it looks like a staircase, and each one of the steps has a few um, indicators of physical violence. Okay. All right. So at the bottom of the steps, it says relationship begins. Okay. So you are now in a relationship that maybe there were red flags, maybe there weren't, but now you find yourself in this relationship. Okay. So what you can do is highlight every line that applies to your relationship. And again, I did this many years after my relationship was over. So go ahead and do this, whether you're still in the relationship or whether you've been out for a while. Go ahead and do this. And I want you to go through this exercise because when we get to my victim to victory scale, I want you to do the same thing, right? All right. So highlight relationship begins. All right. And then the next line up says the batter is charming, loving, and extremely attentive to partner's every need. So if that's how he was at the beginning of your relationship, highlight that line. Okay. And what is that called? Extremely attentive to your every need and loving, right? That's love bombing, right? That's a tactic abusers use to reel you in, right? Okay. So then next line up says accidentally hurts your feelings or hurts feelings of loved ones. Okay. So if that happened, highlight that. Okay. But then the next line up moves to our next step. So I just said accidentally, but now the next line is he purposely hurts feelings or withholds compassion. So if that ever happened, highlight that. All right. And then the next line up says isolates or discourages relationships with friends and family. Now, I think when we think of isolating you, we kind of, now that we know a little more, right, and have been listening to the podcast and reading my book, we know isolation is a bad thing, right? But this can look good at the beginning, right? Because he can be like, oh, babe, I want to spend the whole weekend with you. Let's just stay in together. When the girls asked you out, right? So you were going into the weekend expecting to go out with the girls, but instead he like love bombed you and made you feel so wanted and needed that guess what? You canceled on the girls and stayed home with him, right? And that is the beginning phases of that isolation. Like he is effectively, systematically removing you from the presence of your friends and family. Okay. So if that happened at all, highlight that. All right. The next is name calling, insults, attacks on your self-esteem, or critical of your personality. Okay. My ex-husband used to think I was too skinny and would tear me down on it. And sometimes during, you know what, I mean, that's not cool. That's not cool. All right. So it can be subtle. It can be something you didn't even realize. So name calling, insults, attacks on self-esteem, critical of personality. Now you're going to highlight that whole row, even if just one thing happened. Okay. So maybe he didn't call you names. Maybe he didn't insult you. Maybe he didn't attack your self-esteem, but he was critical of your personality. Okay. Highlight the whole row. Okay. All right. The next step up, and as we go up, each step gets more and more abusive. Okay, so coerces, threatens, intimidates. If he did any of those three things, highlight that row. All right, and the next one is he threatens to harm your loved ones and or your pets. So if he did any of those, highlight that. Next is destroys property. So that could be punching a hole in the wall, throwing a cell phone across the room, slamming things down on the coffee table and breaking the glass on the coffee table. It could be tearing up your clothes or burning your clothes. These are kind of extreme examples, but if he's ever purposefully destroyed any piece of property, especially yours, right? Highlight that line. Okay. And then the next one up is he grabs you, pushes you, shoves you, or throws objects. Okay. If he's done even just one of those things, highlight the whole row. All right. And then now we're going to get into the recognizable physical violence, right? He slaps you with an open hand. If he's ever done that, highlight that. The next line up is kicks, bites, punches, or confines. So if he's done any of those, highlight that line. The next line up is hits with an object or a closed fist, okay? The next one up is beats you up, okay? He pins you down and repeated blows. All right, and then the next step up is he threatens you with a weapon. All right, and when we hear the word weapon, our brain automatically goes to gun, but it could be a knife, right? It could be a cell phone. It could be a hammer. I had a client whose abuser beat her with a vacuum cleaner. Okay, literally anything could be used as a weapon. All right, and then the next line up is attempted strangulation. Okay, if he strangles you, he is literally telling you, sending you the message that he can kill you if he wants to. The next line up is injury with a weapon. And again, it could be anything. Anything can be used as a weapon. The last stair step has two items: severe injury and death. Okay. Now, I haven't had any clients highlight death when they were sitting in my office. Yes, that's kind of a joke. But I did have a client when I worked at the agency who literally highlighted everything but death. She highlighted everything on this scale. Okay. And she looked up at me with tears in her eyes and said, Tina, the next step is he's going to kill me. And I'm like, yeah. This is severe, ladies. And again, so just to review my, I highlighted, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I highlighted 10 of these things. And the top one was threatens with a weapon. Okay, he did threaten me with a weapon. He confined me. He started pushing me around and shoving me. He did these things, and I did not recognize it as being physically abusive. I know better now. If you read my physical abuse chapter, you will see that I recognize it now. But wow, I had no idea. So I want to encourage you that I think even if you're like I was, that didn't really consider my relationship physically violent, going through this scale is going to validate for you that you were in an abusive marriage or that you are in an abusive marriage. And if you are in an abusive marriage or relationship, right, and you've highlighted a whole bunch of these things, it is time to seriously consider getting out, okay? So you contact your local domestic violence shelter, you get an advocate, you do some domestic violence education, you create a safety plan and get out safely, okay? All right. Now, for the second part of this podcast, I want to talk about a concept called restory. And I heard this word at the Call to Peace conference. And I was like, restory, what does that mean? That's an interesting concept. All right. So I sat down and thought about this for a little bit. So I want to read to you what I came up with. Okay. So, so the concept of restory, here's what I mean. Before you ever took your first breath, before you were born, before the trauma, before the heartbreak, before the abuse, God had already written your story. Right? Psalm 139:16 says, "Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me." That means your life isn't random. You weren't an afterthought and you weren't an accident. God designed a story just for you, and he wrote it with purpose, love, and destiny. But then life happened. Abuse happened. Divorce happened. Disappointment, betrayal, shame, loss. They showed up and started rewriting your story with lies. Maybe you've been told, or maybe you believe, that because your marriage failed, then your story failed, that you missed your chance, that you're damaged goods, that the real purpose God had for you is now lost. But that's not true. You see, the God who wrote your story is also the God who can rewrite what the enemy tried to destroy. He's not intimidated by your detours. He's not limited by your pain. And he's not done with your story. And this is where restory comes in, right? God is in the business of restoring stories. Restoring stories. But he doesn't just glue the broken pieces back together. He reworks them into something even more beautiful than before. Romans 11:29 tells us that the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. They can't be changed. That means what he originally intended for you, your identity, your calling, your purpose, they're all still intact. You're not disqualified because you've been hurt. You're not disqualified because you left a marriage that was abusive. You're on your way back to the story God always had in mind for you. But it takes a choice. When we lean into God, when we surrender the broken pieces, the bitterness, the questions, and the pain, he begins the process of restoring our lives. He picks up the pen again and says, "Now, let me show you what I can do with this chapter." Isaiah 46:10 says, "I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. My purpose will stand." His purpose will stand, my sweet sister, no matter what came against you. So if you're feeling stuck in a chapter that looks nothing like the story you hoped for, I want you to know this. This isn't the end. It's just the middle. And God is still writing. He's inviting you into a process of restoration and redemption. He's inviting you to come home to the story he originally wrote for you. You're not starting over. You're being restored. Oh, I love that. Don't you love that? Love, love, love that. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is dive into my victim to victory scale. And I wanted to insert that restory concept because it really, um, ah, it really describes this victim to victory scale. Okay. The process. Okay. All right. So if you um, downloaded that freebie that's in the show notes to this episode, page 2 is my victim to victory scale. And again, these pages are from my workbook. So there's actually some space for you to journal and write down your thoughts about these activities. Okay, so let's do the victim to victory scale. All right, so just like the other one, we're going to start at the bottom and we're going to highlight everything that you've gone through since the abusive relationship ended. Okay, so that's what the bottom line says. So we're going to highlight that. Abusive relationship ends. Now, again, if you're still going through it and you haven't ended the relationship, this doesn't apply to you. However, I want you to still pay attention and come along with me because I want to see where God wants to take you once you do leave. Okay, so assuming the relationship ends, highlight that first one. Okay, so it's not easy when we first leave, right? So we're going to have feelings of betrayal, anger, and grief. So if that happened, go ahead and highlight that. And the next line up says stuck in fear and hopelessness. I'm working with, oh my gosh, I have a handful of family law clients right now that are just going through it, right? Oh my gosh. So stuck in fear and hopelessness. I see that. I see that in these women. And I felt that myself, you know? Okay, the next step up, unable to move beyond the abuse. Okay, so highlight that if you've felt that way. Next, line up new destructive relationships. Guess what, ladies? Like if you don't heal and let God heal those broken places in you, those broken places are going to attract new abusers. Okay, it's a promise. So you've got to do the work and do the healing. And my book and workbook is perfect for that. Okay. Before you get into new relationships. Um, okay. But I see a whole lot of women. In fact, I have a couple of clients in my family law practice that like we're having cases with two different baby daddies because they were abusive relationships and she went right from one to a second one. So please, 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 um, get healing before you move on to a new relationship because we want to attract godly men, right? All right. The next line up is angry at the world and feels like the world owes you. This is that entitlement concept, right? Um, so I know, even though these first few steps seem extremely negative, and they are, right? We're going somewhere with this. So hang on. But these are things that you're going to feel as you're trying to rebuild your life. Okay. So the next line, the next line up is survival mode, right? Just getting through the day. Okay. Now, if you're to this point and you've highlighted everything so far and you are stuck in survivor mode, go back and listen to my series on Mara. And I have that 3 reasons you're stuck in survivor mode opt-in, right? So I've got answers to this. I can literally help you right here cut off these negative things. All right. The next step up is low income job or dependency on the system, right? I've got a client right now that, she really does not want to have to go on food stamps. But sometimes you need to. Sometimes you need to depend on the system for a season, right? It's not meant, and it was never meant to be something that generations of family survive on. No, it's to help people get back on their feet. All right. When I left my abusive marriage and was going through my divorce and had 3 little kids to raise, guess what? We were on food stamps, and it's okay. But when I moved on and got my education and got a better job, guess what? Then I didn't have to depend on the system anymore. So it can be a good thing. It can help us get back on our feet. But we don't want to stay dependent on the system, right? Okay. And then going back to new destructive relationships, right? The next line up is swears off intimate relationships for good, right? Like, I don't need a man, and all men are evil. Like, I never want to go through that again. Right. So we swear off intimate relationships, and that's not good either. That's not good either, because there are strong, beautiful, confident men of God out there too. Okay. All right. Now we're about halfway up, and right smack dab in the middle says recognizes a need for change. Okay. So up until halfway up the scale, negative things are happening, but they're normal things that you go through when you've left an abusive relationship, right? But now at this point, halfway through, we recognize we need to change. Something has got to give, right? And maybe you're laying in bed at night crying, God, there's got to be more. Something has got to give, right? So moving up the stair step, maybe you seek counseling or a support group. Or maybe you go to your local domestic violence shelter, because that is a great place to start, especially if you are in a low income job and don't have health insurance and can't go to a counselor, right? A local domestic violence shelter is your best first step, because there's going to be women there that are going through what you're going through. There's going to be some support groups. They might have some counseling, but they have an advocate who's more than willing to listen to you and help you process what you've been through. It's a great first step. Okay. And then the next step up is builds new friendships. All right. And perhaps you meet some great women of like mind in the support groups that you're in, right? Okay. And then the next step up is repairs relationships with your children. And the next line is repairs relationships with friends and family. So remember, um, back on the escalation of violence scale, that isolation was a huge tactic abusers use, right? To isolate you from your friends and family, and even from your children, right? They can destroy relationships with your own children. So beginning to repair these relationships is crucial to your healing and your forward movement. Okay. So then the next step up, you're going to consider school, going back to school, and career options, right? And this is like part of your story that God wrote for you in the first place, right? He already knew what you would do for a living. He already knew how he wanted to use you to reach other people for the kingdom, right? And I truly believe that school and education and our career and our job, like these are critical components to what God created us to do to advance his kingdom. Okay. And really, that is what Purpose After DV is all about. Okay. All right. So then after consider school and career options, the next line up is implements plan to better your future. So if you considered going back to school, all right, so you find a school and you enroll and you start going to classes, right? So you implement a plan to a better future. And then the next line up is you are able to enjoy healthy relationships because you got out of survivor mode. You did the healing, right? Does this sound familiar? This is Mara's story, right? This is Mara's story. And this can be your story too. You will be able to enjoy healthy relationships again. Okay. And then the last step at the top, God is going to turn your mess into your message and give you an abundant life, right? The escalation of violence scale shows the picture of the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, right? But the top of the victim to victory scale says, but Jesus has come to give you life and give it to you abundantly. Oh my gosh. I love that. I love how resources that I found years ago and a resource that I created years and years ago, today, like God puts it all together with his word. God brings the word to life. And you, my sweet sister, he has a beautiful, abundant life waiting for you. So I just want to encourage you today. If you weren't able to pull these up because you're listening to this driving in the car, when you go and next time you're at a computer, go download this and do this exercise. You can always listen to this podcast again and go through it with me again when you have paper and highlighter in hand. Um, yeah. So, oh my gosh. I love God. I love God so much. And I love how he just brings everything full circle. I really am feeling a full circle moment right here. Right. And that scripture verse, John 10:10, right? The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus comes to give you abundant life. I love it. I love that. And remember, this is not the end of your story. He's inviting you into the process of restoration and redemption. He's inviting you to come home to the story he originally wrote for you, right? And again, the other thing I loved, he doesn't just glue the broken pieces back together. He reworks them into something even more beautiful than before. Okay? His purpose and destiny for you cannot be changed. The only thing that would change it is your choice. So what choice are you going to make today, my sweet sister? Are you going to partner with God and lean into what he has for you and allow him to to restore you? I hope your answer is yes. And if it is, I'm here to walk along beside you. I love you, my sweet sister. Have a blessed week. Thank you so much for joining me on my Purpose After Domestic Violence podcast. I hope today's conversation resonated with you. And if you think it could encourage someone you know, please share it. Together, we can spread the light of healing and purpose. I would so appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, and leave me a review. These small actions would bless me indeed and help other women find this podcast and be encouraged too. Remember, you are not alone. Your strength is undeniable, and your journey is worth celebrating. If you have questions, thoughts, or topics you'd like me to explore in the future, please reach out on social media, or you can visit my website at purposeafterdv.com. Before we part ways, always remember, you are a strong, beautiful, confident woman of God, and your purpose is shining brightly within you. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep moving forward on your journey to a life filled with purpose.